Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would give you guys my little fight predictions before the fight happens this week, and I believe it's Wednesday, September 23rd. So, 3 days until this fight happens, or 3 more days anyway. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into these two fights. These are the main two fights that I'll be predicting for you guys today. Very excited for these fights. So let's get on with my predictions and who I think is going to win this fight. I'm on a one fight winning streak right now. I predicted Colby Covington to win dominantly against Tyron Woodley, and that's exactly what he did. I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well. So it is what it is. But anyway, we're going to get into these fights. Who do I think is going to win and why? Okay. So, the first fight we're going to talk about is Dominic Reyes versus Jan Blachowicz. So, who do I think is going to win this fight and why? Well, to put it simply, I believe Dominic Reyes is going to pull out in this fight. I believe he's going to be the winner. When I seen Dominic Reyes against John Jones, I thought he gave him a very tough fight. A lot of people actually thought Dominic Reyes won that fight. I personally don't believe Dominic Reyes won the John Jones fight, but I do believe he gave him a lot of problems. One thing I've always noticed about Dominic Reyes, he has a decent amount of power. He likes to throw punches and bunches. He likes to throw a lot of combinations. He's very good in the clinch from what I've seen. So when it comes down to it, Dominic Reyes is a very decent opponent. He's a very great fighter. Now, that being said, Jan Blachowicz, he's a very good fighter as well. He's a very great fighter as well, depending what rank you really consider him. I believe his rematch against, Corey Anderson was his name. I believe him knocking out Corey Anderson has really shown how much Jan Blachowicz has really grown. He's knocked out Luke Rockhold, he's knocked out Corey Anderson, he's knocked out a couple of others. And if Dominic Reyes is not careful, he could get knocked out against Jan Blachowicz because Jan Blachowicz is none to mess around with. He's got great power, very decent counter puncher, great 1-2 puncher. But that's really the problem. That's the reason why I predict Dominic Reyes to win this fight. Because Jan Blachowicz' pace, in my opinion, is just not going to be able to keep up with Dominic Reyes' pace. Jan Blachowicz is a very good 1-2, counter puncher or, very good striker. But Dominic Reyes, even if you want to say that he's not necessarily the striker that Jan Blachowicz is, which I'm not necessarily sure if that would be true, Dominic Reyes throws punches and bunches, and if you're, going up against a combination puncher, you better have very accurate counter-punching ability, which he somewhat does, but I'm not sure if it's to the degree of, say, a Rose Namajunas when she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which is why Rose won against Joanna twice, because if you're going up against a combination puncher and you're a counter-puncher, that's great, but you got to make sure that your counter-punches are are extremely accurate and that you keep them at a distance and a certain amount of other things and that you're not getting hit in return. So it is what it is. So that's a very tough job. And I'm just not sure if Jan Blachowicz has the pedigree really to do that. I think that he's a very good fighter, even great fighter. But Dominic Reyes, I believe, is on another level. We'll see what happens. I believe that Dominic Reyes is going to win this fight by unanimous decision. I predict him to win at least 4 rounds to 1. Would I be surprised if this were a 3 rounds to 2 fight or if Jan Blachowicz somehow pulled out of this? I wouldn't be overly, I wouldn't be shocked, my jaw on the floor, but I would be a little bit surprised. I believe personally that Dominic Reyes should win this fight at least 3 rounds to 2 or 4 rounds to 1. Now that I think about it, Dominic Reyes does have a little bit of a stamina issue in 5 round fights when I seen him in the John Jones fight. Now maybe that's just because I was against John Jones, but he did have a little bit of a stamina issue in the John Jones fight later on, so he's got to watch out for that. But other than that, I believe Dominic Reyes almost has the advantage in every other category. So I'm going with Dominic Reyes on this one. I believe he'll win the belt. The belt is now up for grabs for those of you guys that don't know, because John Jones relinquished his belt and now it's up for grabs. So it is what it is. But anyways, the winner of this fight will be the new light heavyweight champion, I believe, of the UFC. So that's something. That's great. But anyway, I believe it's going to be Dominic Reyes. We'll see what happens, but that's my prediction for that fight. Dominic Reyes is the new UFC light heavyweight champion. So let's go on into the main fight. Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. Who do I think is going to win this fight and why? Well, even though a lot of people see this as a very great fight because they're both undefeated, I believe Paulo Costa's 13-0, correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe Israel's 19-0. I'm quite certain on that one. But when it comes down to it, I don't believe that this is going to be a close fight. I believe this is going to be a dominant fight forward in one man's corner. I believe the winner in this fight is going to be Israel Adesanya. And a certain amount of people say, well, you say it's going to be a dominant win for Israel. Why do you say it's going to be a dominant win for Israel? The reason why I say it's going to be a dominant win for Israel is because although this is a very tough defense, although this is a very tough fight for both of them, I just think that there's so much more advantages that Israel has in this fight. And on top of that, there's Paulo Costa for a title defense that Israel is going to have. Paulo Costa really seems tailor made for Israel Adesanya, in my opinion. And the reason why that is because when I take a look at his weaknesses, I don't really know what he's going to be able to do against Israel. Now, could Paulo Costa win this fight? He absolutely could. He absolutely could. You don't underestimate Paulo Costa. He is a very big man. He's very strong. He's very powerful. He does have a decent amount of skills. But when I take a look at it, I don't think that I don't really trust his cardio, first of all. And secondly, the one thing that also bothers me about Paulo Costa, his head seems to be down the center line a little bit too often. And what I mean by that overall is that his head's a little bit too linear. He don't move his head the greatest amount. Now, that's not saying he doesn't move his head, but when it comes down, I've seen him get caught by a couple of shots by a couple of fighters that he was in the ring with, and he got stunned because he was not moving his head enough. He also does not avoid jabs very well. Now, Israel does not really avoid jabs very well either, so both of them are going to have to watch out for that. But the problem with that is that Israel Adesanya is going to have an 8-inch reach advantage. 8-inch reach advantage. Let me pronunciate a little bit more clearly because that's a huge goddamn reach advantage right there. So it's going to be very hard for Paulo Costa because we already know what he's probably going to do. I highly doubt they're going to fight in the middle of the ring. Paulo Costa most likely is going to try and go up against the cage with Israel. He's going to try to pressure him. He's going to try to go to the body. I think that he needs to go to the body, go to the legs, and obviously, I think Paulo, if he wants to win this fight, he's going to have to rough him up a little bit early. He's going to have to try and hurt Israel early. He's going to have to go to the body. He's going to have to go to the legs. I think he's going to have to try to rough him up early. Try to rough him up as much as you can. Don't waste your stamina, but throw intelligent shots. Go to the body. Mix up your combinations. When it comes down to it, try to rough him up early. Try to make him uncomfortable early. That's what I think Paulo Costa's plan should be because the more Israel gets comfortable into the fight, the more likely he's going to win, obviously. So, that's with any fighter. But Israel seems to relax under pressure a decent amount. He seemed like he did in the Kelvin Gastelum fight. In the later rounds do seem to go towards Israel when I take a look at it. So Israel, I think to make him uncomfortable, rough him up a little bit in the first round, try to hurt him a little bit, bully him a little bit up against the cage if Paulo Costa wants to win this fight. The question is, will he be able to do that? Because when I take a look at Israel, Israel has enough power to knock somebody out. He has an 8-inch reach advantage. He has a very decent jab, a very good foundation of skills. I believe that he will be able to get to Paulo Costa before Paulo Costa gets to him, not just because of the 8-inch reach advantage, but once again, Paulo Costa does not move his head extremely well. And on top of that, when it comes down to it, Paulo Costa, I don't trust his cardio either. And the reason why I say that is because against his fight against Yoel Romero, after the first 2 rounds, which were very tough rounds, and you probably gave those 2 rounds to Paulo Costa, which, very fair. But the third round, Yoel Romero won because it looked like Paulo Costa was completely exhausted. And Yoel Romero pretty much had his way in the third round. That scares me a little bit for Paulo Costa. Israel is someone to where he looks like he has a very good gas tank. He has good cardio. Paulo Costa looks like someone who is a little bit too muscle bound and might tire out after 2 rounds. And that's why I predict Israel Adesanya to win this fight by TKO. I believe Israel Adesanya is going to stop him within 4 rounds. Israel could knock him out even earlier than that. Now, would I be surprised if this were a unanimous decision for Israel? I would not be surprised. Israel might be a little bit more, complacent in this fight just because, he believes Paulo Costa is on something, as do I. But, that's neither here nor there. But when it comes down to it, Israel Adesanya, he probably knows that he has a lot of power. And if he feels it early, he might be a little bit more complacent to throw here and there. But when it comes down to it, I believe Israel is going to win this fight by stoppage. And the reason why that is because I believe Israel is going to catch him. And I believe overall that right hand is going to be deadly in this fight. I believe that he's going to catch him with something, that he's going to counter him with something, and that Paulo Costa is going to go to the floor. Eventually, he's going to be very tired, I believe. And I don't know what Paulo Costa is going to look like after the first 2 rounds. The first 2 rounds, he seems fine. And I'm not even sure if he's going to win those rounds. But in round 3, round 4... we'll see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen because Paulo Costa, I'm not necessarily sure if his gas tank is really up for the challenge. And even if he tries to go in there early, Israel has a very crisp amount of counter punches. He has a very good right hand, very good left. He keeps distance very well. I want to see if Paulo Costa is able to handle it. I want to see overall if he's able to handle it. Israel establishes distance very well. If he hits him with the right hand, I want to see how Paulo Costa reacts, because I have seen him hit with right hands overall, and I have seen him stunned and hurt before against Uriah Hall and against Yoel Romero. Well, that wasn't with the right hand, that was with the left hand, I believe. But anyway, when it comes down to it overall, Paulo Costa needs to watch out in this fight. I personally believe Israel Adesanya will win this fight dominantly. That's my prediction for this weekend, guys. Let me know what you think. I'm going with Israel Adesanya by 4th round TKO, and I'm going with Dominic Reyes by unanimous decision. All right, so still and overall new, because Reyes overall, either Reyes or Blachowicz will be the new champion. But anyway, that's really about it for my predictions. Let me know what you guys think, and that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching.